Okay, welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is fantasy and sci-fi author Claudia Blood, and she's here to talk about her book Raven. Did I get that right? Oh,
Ravine.
Ravine. It is, of course, it would be
Yeah,
the other one.
of course.
Um, anyway, and that's book one of the Renegades Rising series. And I'm
Yes,
going to
ma'am.
turn it over to her now and let her introduce herself. So take it away.
Hi, I am Claudia Blood, and just as you said, I'm in middle of writing the Renegades Rising series. And if you read my previous trilogy, the Relic trilogy, this is the bad guy. And I loved her so much from the previous trilogy that she ended up with her own series. And so now I've got a series of interconnected novellas that basically gather the forces of the Renegades. And then the final book is going to be the epic battle against who they're being renegades against. So I'm super excited about the series. Ravina's out right now, and Mouse is going to be out, which is the second book in the series, later next month. So, and they should be out. The other four or two should be out later this year. And it's sci-fi, sci-fantasy. There's all sorts of crazy, strong women, and all sorts of crazy situations. So it'll be fun.
Okay, good. We're going to have fun today because we're talking about villains, my favorite subject. Okay, so tell us about the book. What's it about?
So, Ravine is about, so she was a scientist. She's a genius. And she had a tragic accident that happened in the beginning of the book where she lost her daughter. She did not handle it well and ended up doing, she discovered, created a almost fast as light drive, and she was voluntold to do the first mission with a human in it to try and help the cope with the grief and get better PR marketing. And while she's out there, she figures out that she was meant to discover time travel. So it is her journey from being a devastated mom all the way up and through until she can figure out how to get off the ground with discovering time travel. And that's sort of the first part of her epic journey.
Okay, so what inspired, well, the book, you said it was based on another series, but what inspired the whole thing for you to write?
Um, I had two. So the original trilogy, the Relic trilogy, started out with a dream, and I had two actually. One of them was the scene where Ravine lost her daughter, and so the bad guy's sort of pivotal moment that turned her into who she is or started the journey. That was a part of it, and then I had a scene where there were some people who were going through the jungle and they ended up finding this ancient alien temple, and when they went inside and figured out how to turn the machine on, a 1980s aerobics instructor ended up kind of, in a blue ball of lightning on the stage in the middle of it. So they're in the middle of this alien jungle, and there it is, an 80s aerobics instructor. And I was like, wait, what in the world just happened? How did this all come together? And those two came together to form this whole entire series, both series really.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Somewhere I want to read that aerobics instructor story, um, how she ended up there. So tell us about the main character. What's she like? What's her personality?
So Ravine is a little cold. She's analytical. She's hiding an inner passion. She's very dedicated and is going to extremes to try and save her daughter. And it was one of those interesting questions that came up, like how far would you go to save the person that you love the most in the world? And in Ravine's case, it was her daughter. So what would she do? And so she's a little she's on her downward spiral. Sorry, because she becomes, you're at the beginning where she's not quite a bad guy, but she's doing her downward spiral now. And so she's starting to sort of lose her humanity and not really think about um, how people will respond. She doesn't think about people. How about that? Because of the way she's disconnected from the world. So if I had to, restate what she is, she's very smart, very passionate, starting to get blinders on when it comes to people, and is very focused on her end goal of bringing her daughter back.
Okay, so what about the setting? Is this a slightly futuristic setting, a far
It
future
is.
setting?
Yep, it's a futuristic setting. It's a bit dystopian because the company that she was working for ended up trashing the planet through this series. And she sees it because she's doing almost as fast as light travel. There's time dilation involved, so she kind of skips through on time. So she'll come back. It's 1 year. It's 1 year for her and 22 years for the Earth is how the math works out on that. And so she'll come back 80 years later, and suddenly the Earth is, it's all smoggy and everything else. And so it is on Earth periodically hopping through time, and then it's also on her little spaceship as she's going out and doing um, her missions as she's doing those. And then it also has one part on an alien planet where she discovers time particles and other alien species.
Yeah. Did you do a lot of research into the science behind everything, like the faster than light drive and
I
things like that?
did. Yep. I watched a lot of videos, and I've got a science background, not a physics background, but I did enjoy physics class when back in college. But so I did do a lot of research trying to make it as realistic as possible. You have to always like grain of salt, right? Like it's not something we can do right now to go almost as fast as light. But I figured out the percentage of the light, and then found a site that gave me the formula to figure out the number of years translation, and then picked a star system that was appropriate for the distance it needed to happen for the story, and kind of laid it out from there. So there was a bit of research to figure things out.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
So, do you have any themes that are running through the book and the series?
Um, there's a lot in this book about how much you're willing to sacrifice for some reason. I don't know where that came from, but like I said, she started sacrificing small things, and then those things got bigger and bigger and bigger. Um, and it came out in the other book. So in the Relic trilogy, when she actually hits the end of her actual series where she's the bad guy in it, there's a redemptive arc in there. So I probably shouldn't say that, but there is. So um, the other books, all of the main characters in the novellas for the series, they're all there's a corporate sort of monster that's in charge of the world, if you want to say it that way. And so there's a lot of what they have to do to fight back against that corporate monster. So that's, the big, I've got a lot of David and Goliath type of things going on in there. And they're all the Davids. So
So
female
it
David.
seems like you have like almost two antagonists. You have like the corporate themed antagonist, and you have the internal antagonist with this series as well, because
Yes,
she's basically descending into a villain.
she is. Yep. Yep. The next book in the series, the same sort of thing where she has to do some things that she's against doing. So she's breaking the infrastructure, and she's doing these things that are, ultimately bad, but she's doing it for a good cause. And so she's going to struggle with that a lot.
So it's sort
Mouse.
of the end justifies the means in her mind.
For Ravenne, absolutely. For Ravenne, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene or type of scene that you wrote in the book?
Um, I did not enjoy writing or thinking about her daughter dying, so that was a very hard scene for me. I've got a daughter, and so just thinking about something like that tragical happening was really sort of hard for me. I did not. I'm not a like roll around in the details, and um, it was not. I think it was done well enough so that you could feel it, but you weren't like it wasn't like smacked right into your face. She had, but that was a hard scene for me to write with what happened with her daughter.
Okay, what is your favorite scene or type of scene that you wrote in the book?
So I love when, and this is going to sound so crazy, but I love when there are these, okay, monsters of whatever type that come and end up like attacking the main character, and they come up with this like great solution for figuring out how to overcome them. I love those type of scenes, and so this ravine has killer bots, so they're like, remember the old HKs from Terminator, the
Mm.
original one? There's something kind of like that. And so how she got around doing that was, I just love coming up with that creative idea with, okay, she's in a subway and she's by herself and it's dark and she doesn't really have anything. Like, how is she going to get the better of this, this thing that's out to kill her? So I love those type of scenes throughout the book.
Sounds like fun. So tell us a little bit about the secondary characters. Do any of them stand out, steal scenes?
Oh my gosh, I totally at the end of Ravine, there was somebody who wasn't supposed to be anyway. He's supposed to be like this throwaway character, and all of a sudden he like turned into this. So she is waking someone up from deep sleep, and he's the second in command, and the previous force had gotten annihilated by some monsters on the planet, and she was the only survivor. And so she's waking this guy up and trying to decide how to handle it because she's got her own ulterior motives for being there. And this guy, Jeffrey, woke up and sort of took over. Like, he surprised her and he had his own motive, and suddenly he was like this assassin. And I was like, where in the world did you come up with? And so he decided he is going to be a main character in book 3 in this series. So I was like, okay, then here you go. I guess Jeffrey's going to be important.
Yeah, well, you better watch him. He may want his own series.
I know. I think he might. Yeah.
Okay, so what are your characters afraid of?
Um, Ravine is very much about failure. She's taking a lot on herself, that it's her fault ultimately. So even though she blames the company for not having good safety equipment, she still blames herself for her daughter's death. So everything hinges on her. She puts a lot of pressure on herself to try and make this happen. This happen being figuring out how to invent time travel. So, which I know is kind of a crazy goal, but it's totally in line with who she is. So
Okay, so you obviously write science fiction, sci-fi, fantasy sort of thing. Are there any other genres that you want to branch out into,
I do
or
have
have branched out into?
I do, I do have a paranormal suspense that I did. It's at the cabin, and it was a lot of fun to write. In fact, that was the first book that I had gotten done, and it didn't have any sort of paranormal or anything weird inside of it. It was just a suspense, and I hated it even when it was done. And so I went back and rewrote it and added in fantasy elements to it in order for me to actually like the book. I decided I can't do it without some sort of element like that. And I keep trying to write romance because I love the happy endings and I love those sorts of things, but I suck at it. So we'll see if that ever comes up. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
still do the Pete's. Yeah.
yeah. You and me both. We both suck at romance.
Oh,
I tried to write a paranormal romance once. It turned into a horror novel with a sex scene. So
see, exactly. It's like,
yeah,
and then something boring happens. Like, okay, where's the alien invention or the zombie apocalypse or like what's going to happen?
yeah. I knew I was in trouble when the black goo started. So yeah, it was no good. It's like, yeah, yeah, paranormal romances don't have black torture goo, so yeah,
No,
I'm writing a
no,
horror novel
no.
here.
I mean, some of them can be dark, I guess, but you still have to hit all those right beats in order for it to be a romance. So
Yeah, so I just leaned into the horror after that. So
that's awesome. That is awesome. And I used to write horror and then I had kids and I had to give it up because I was already so like paranoid with having kids that I just couldn't do that to myself to really like revel in the horror portion of it. So maybe someday it'll come back.
okay, so what would you say is the best trait of Ravine, and what's the worst trait of Ravine?
So, her best trait, I can't decide if it's persistence or intelligence. They battle it out for number one. Her worst trait, though, she's very myopic. So she's very very focused on just the goal and doesn't care about the effects on anybody else in her world. And I think that's obviously a very bad trait. I mean, good for a bad guy, I suppose, but not good for a real person.
Okay, so can you give us any little hints or teasers for the upcoming rest of the series?
So the next book in the series is Mouse. It is standalone in that you do not have to read Ravine in order to read Mouse. They're interconnected from a time, and by the end of Mouse, she ends up meeting Ravine, where Ravine ends up in the previous novel. Mouse is I love Mouse. She is tiny and fierce and protective of her nana, and she smuggles between these underground levels in Earth because I told you that the Earth got all smog filled. So they built these underground caverns for people to survive in. And she's in the bottommost cavern that's isolated from everybody else. And she's figured out how to climb up through all of the ductwork and everything else to get to the other levels. And so she smuggles goods between the levels. And I love her. She's such a great, persistent character.
Great. So why don't you tell everyone? We'll wrap it up here. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and your books?
I am at claudiablood.com. I am on Ravenne is on Amazon only, but everything else is wide, and it will be wide at some point. But if anything, everything is up on claudiablood.com.
Yeah, and I have that website linked in the description below if you want to go check out her website and all her books. They sound wonderful, so do go check them out. And I'd like to thank you for being a guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you and chat with you.
Okay, and that's it for this episode of Between the Pages Book Chat. We may not be back next week, but we should be back the following week. So see us then, and bye for now.